بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وصلوات الله وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. Welcome to all the anti-vaxxers, the pro-vaxxers, the ex-vaxxers, everybody who's in between. Anybody else here who wants to be categorized in a box or want to be kept out of it. This is a lecture that I've actually given it before in a lot more detail, of course, to medics in a specific sense, to medics in a specialist kind of settings in terms of seminars which are aimed at dealing with contemporary issues. But I also teach it for Al-Maghrib as well in the Fiqh of Death, going into a lot more detail concerning the matters of medication and then specifically vaccination and the various theories behind it and the Islamic issues that are associated with it. That's probably not the main reason that I'm giving this presentation today. In actual fact, if I was going to say what my number one motivation was, it would be that I've actually been quite taken back, a bit shocked by the level of, the toxicity that Muslims have fallen into when it comes to discussing things. Now listen, this is a human problem, right? There's no doubt that the last few years has seen that kind of, ratcheted up to a whole different level. It doesn't matter whether it's, you're for Brexit or against Brexit, whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you are, Marmite or no Marmite, Messi or Ronaldo. You can't, from the very important things to the meaningless things, sport and entertainment to politics and life and death. People have not been able to present themselves and conduct themselves in the right way, with the right adab, the right tolerance. And what's really disappointing is when you see Muslims fall into this trap, because Muslims have got a lot of experience in this. We've come off aqidah wars and madhab wars for the last, hundreds and hundreds of years. We know how important adab is. It's a religious requirement, not just a social kind of, nicety. It's a religious requirement. So when Muslims kind of go at one another, especially on matters in which there are interpretations possible, or they're matters of politics, or they're matters of interpretation and perception, and especially when you see very low quality, very low quality analysis of evidences. I think that's what probably disappoints me most of all. Bad adab, all of us have a bad day. But when you let your principles slip, especially Muslim. This word Muslim, it comes associated with so much honor, so much respect. These are people whose whole entire life, their entire system, their integrity and their pedigree is based upon their love and analysis for evidence. Their insistence on making sure that sources are checked, not just for authenticity in terms of how they are narrated, but also then what is being said, whether it contradicts well-established fact or the majority positions or not. The different aspects or in terms of information, in terms of whether it is palatable and whether that makes an impact upon its authenticity or not. The connection between meanings of statements, whether you like them or not, and your personal feelings towards them, versus the actual validity of these statements. Understanding the system that statements are made in as well. Understanding the fields, making sure that experts are speaking and allowed to speak and are given a greater weight than the masses. Muslims must be at the forefront of understanding these principles. Must be. And so when you see, and especially what's come forward in the vaccine kind of debate, this whole kind of discussion about whether vaccines are safe or not, whether there's a global control or not, whether there's some XYZ blah 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 or not, it's not becoming of Muslims to just be lazy, right? Whether that's lazy, just perpetuating the controversies or conspiracy theories that they find on the internet, or Alex Jones on Joe Rogan's podcast, or whatever it is, or whether it's just being a card-carrying member of the medical professionals and just carrying on. And listen, disclaimer, I've got a lot to say about this. This is not just a presentation of what the Sharia says. And of course, when I say that, the Sharia doesn't say anything. The Sharia doesn't have a voice. There are interpretations, of course, of the Sharia. But there are certain principles that are indisputable. in which there is no space for opinion. I will proffer, meaning I will offer up my own personal opinion and interpretation from an Islamic point of view, but that's going to be at the end. I want to put forward the scientific facts. Then I want to address some of the concerns and issues, see what is true, what is false, and respond to that. And I then also want to then give, in a section of its own, despite what the facts are or what the facts are not, give the Islamic ruling on that, what the scholars have said, what the madhahib have said. And then I will give you my own opinion for those people who are either, they don't have a madhab or they don't have a particular opinion, they just want to hear what I have to say. So the Islamic side is pretty straightforward, and I'll deal with that. But I also have game in this. I'm a clinical pharmacist by profession. My background is actually through industry. My pre-reg was done in industry, and I chose that path. Obviously, as a lazy pack that I am, I went to locuming because that's where the easy money was and the freedom. But my passion, where I actually started, was with medicines and manufacturing. A little thing that you might not know, other than the fact that I don't like using my hands for crisps, is that I used to run my own company and I used to manufacture medicines as well. I know everything that is involved in this area, the regulatory bodies that are involved, the tricks that can be played, the shortcuts that can be taken, the financial matters, the issue of safety and the issues of side effects and testing and trials. These are things that obviously is my industry. But other than that, I am a health professional, and I am part of the wider body of healthcare professionals that are expected to support vaccinations as part and parcel of that industry. But you need to have the confidence in me that doesn't mean anything to me per se. The professional organizations that I belong to mean nothing more than me being a British citizen and agreeing with them doing illegal acts or haram acts or whatever. Just because I'm a member of something or a citizen of something does not mean I agree with everything that they say or do. So I will want to try and present everything without necessarily betraying my own personal position, but I certainly will. I mean, this is my own presentation, why not? I certainly will put up my own personal opinion as well. And where I want to start with straight away is the concept of medicines. We have to have this basis before we do anything else. And again, I'm going to summarize because we could be here for hours. Effectively, what I'm doing is that I am giving a summary for each section, maybe 5 or 6 different sections. Each section, which would be a class elsewhere. So I'm giving you like the headlines of each class. So when it comes to the concept of medication and taking medication and giving medicinal services to others, we need to differentiate between the two. They're different. As for personal taking, the majority of the scholars consider it to be permissible or recommended. The Hanafi school and the Maliki school famously have been upon the permission of al-ibaha, meaning that it is allowed, something which if you don't do is fine, and if you do is fine. And a lot of people get surprised by this because they see very kind of demure, neutral kind of language to something which people think is so obvious. If you're ill, you're going to be in such a depleted state, it's going to affect you, your quality of life, the things that you do, etc., etc. And to some extent that's true. To some extent that's true, but we also have other concerns in addition to just being sick and ill that need to be protected. So for example, we are people, as you saw in the poster, and mashallah it's a very nice poster, but the most important line was the very small print right at the very, very beginning, that we don't believe that health and safety and success and cure and whatever is in the hands of anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the most absolute dead certain medication is not going to work except Allah wants it to. And the absolute no hope chance, not even taking any medication, if Allah wants that person to be cured, then they will be cured. And that's something which is not just a rhetorical statement. And that's unfortunately what it's become. And imagine that this is what our scholars used to think back in the day. They used to be afraid that Muslims would lose their tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because once you start being so dependent upon doctors and specialists and consultants and medicines, if you miss out on seeing one, or you don't get access to the hospital, or if you don't take your medicines, you start to panic. And that panic is not becoming of a Muslim, because you're putting now so much dependence upon the means and you're forgetting the cause. And this lack of tawakkul is something which was expressed by the Prophet ﷺ, because a lot of people know, of course, that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah anzala da wa dawa," that Allah has sent down the disease and He sent down the cure وَجَعْلَ لَكُمْ وَجَعْلَ لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاء, and that He has given for every disease a cure. فَتَدَاوَوْا, so medicate, take medicine. But وَلَا تَدَاوَ بِحَرَامٍ, but don't use haram medication. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is informing us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down with every disease a cure. Something for us to be able to go and find. His second statement, وَجَعَلَ لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاء, is like a clue. It's an indication that as now every disease is there, the cure is there as well. Like enticing us to go and find it. فَتَدَاوَوْا, so seek medication. So in a general sense, it's a positive thing. But it comes with restrictions. The scholars were always cautious. This hadith, you might think, right, there you go, it's obligatory to now medicate. However, from the Prophet ﷺ used to take medicine. He used to do cupping. He used to have the hijama, as we call it. He allowed others to seek medicinal treatment. When he saw ruqya being given by some of the companions, he praised them for it. He ate from the payment that was received from it. So it's not in any way he didn't disapprove of the field. However, the Prophet ﷺ is always also bringing our attention to the akhirah as well. We cannot sacrifice a momentary health benefit for weakness in our aqeedah, in our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why some of the Hanbali scholars didn't even consider it even to be permissible. Some of them even put forward that it's not necessary at all to take medication, meaning that if a person suffers from it, they should be patient with it, and if they are patient and put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reward that will come as a result of that is better for that person than getting cured per se. And if they want to take medication, then it's allowed. So it's very kind of hands-offish. And so you will not find from the classical scholars an opinion that says it is absolutely obligatory to take medication, except in a very few circumstances where the cure is 100% or almost near certain to have an impact. And as we know in the field of medicine, most medicines are not certain. Many are just attempts to try and find out what's going on. Many have side effects, and sometimes the side effects can be severe. And you are not obligated to have to put up with side effects, even if you are suffering from a particular condition. So I just want you to understand the nuance here, that even from a basic principle, the majority of scholars did not consider to take medication an obligation. So you can already see where that's going to go to. I mean, the Shafi'i school, probably the most foremost from the classical, they recommended medication and they considered it obligatory if there really was a defined benefit with minimal side effects. And there's more discussion. Ibn Taymiyyah, similar to that. Shaykh Abu Eesa Niamatullah alayhi rahmatullah, from our modern times, they were also kind of along this kind of school. And there's a lot of discussion. Again, I don't want to open up that chapter to a large extent. There's a lot of detail. My point is that unless the medicine is absolutely 100% going to have clinical benefit with minimal side effects, that's going to be used in the right way, that's not going to reduce your tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this fear was back then when the Muslims were strong and believing. Nowadays, you have Muslims who don't even think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when they're ill, right? I want you to imagine, just now in this conversation, I mean, this is an academic type lecture-ish, if I can ever be seen to be given an academic lecture, which I can't for more than 5 minutes, I'll bust a joke somewhere. But if you think, we didn't speak about ruqya, we didn't speak about adhkar, we didn't speak about those dua that we're meant to give and make and say in the morning and the evening that protect us. Immediate thing, we get a headache, who's got a paracetamol? It's not astaghfirullah, what did I do? It's not oh Allah la mushfini, it's not using dua or adhkar that has been narrated from the Prophet ﷺ. It's immediately straight into the medicine. That is a proof of our decreasing tawakkul and not connecting the sabab, the musabbib, the one who Allah, the one who causes it, and what's actually happening right here in front of us right now. So it could be argued that's even more of a concern. Now, also add to that we have authentically narrated from the Prophet ﷺ that he promised 70,000 from his ummah, that those who did not resort to medicinal techniques and treatments such as cauterization, such as cupping, such as ruqya, that they would enter heaven, Jannah, without hisab, highest level. an indication that these are people who have a very high trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the epileptic woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, suffering from epilepsy, the Prophet ﷺ actually advised her that it would be in her best interest. He gave her a choice. I can make dua for you to get this cured, or you can be patient with it. And the woman, when she understood that there's actually a source of reward in this for me, then I'll take it. And so the Prophet ﷺ, again, didn't obligate medical treatment, and also actually advised for a person to be patient. So this is a nuanced argument. Do not go out there, I mean, this is like to the pro-vaxxers right now, thinking that medicines are absolutely everything, and that to medicinally treat and take medicines is absolutely everything. And the irony, of course, doctors and certainly pharmacists will know this. I mean, doctors are probably the people who least go to their doctors, and pharmacists are almost definitely the people who take least medicine, right? And yet we are the ones who propagate, obviously, for health policies to go to doctors and take medicines, and yet we don't. Is the reason because we're worried about them, we're scared about them? I think it's many, many reasons. The point is that at least there's a sense of realism. At least we don't get carried away with the role of the doctor. I mean, how many times have we put GPs on a pedestal, and honestly, man, they ain't got a dally what's going on. They're making as big a guess as you are. And we're going to a pharmacist who's what else but a glorified shopkeeper, right? People need to calm down about their own positions and then the medicines themselves. I mean, this is my area. We will go and we will say, okay, try that statin. Or if that's no good, then come back, try another statin. Okay, that's no good. Okay, come back, try another statin. Same for the heart. Same. We're trialing back and forth. Miskeen has to go through pains, headache. Oh, that one killed me. Oh, my muscle's absolutely dead. Okay, you know what? That's no good. Try this one. People have to put themselves through pain. Subhanallah. If we ourselves would then say, you know what, after giving all these statins out, all these medications out to people, say, you know what, I'm in that situation, I'm just going to sort out my diet, right? I'm going to fix up, I'm going to make sure I get the right fats, avoid the bad cholesterol, and I'm going to try to avoid going into statins because I know what a nightmare that is. That's just from a secular point of view. So why would Islam obligate upon people having to take medication? It's a very big statement to say it's obligatory to take medication. Anyway, I actually spoke about this I think at the beginning of the COVID crisis as well. And there are other lectures around, so we can move on from that. But what about vaccinations specifically? What about this particular area of medicine, which is fascinating because there's a lot of rumors out there as well about, that the Muslims and the Ottoman Empire, they're the ones that created vaccinations or started off vaccinations. That's not entirely true, but we've definitely got game. We've got game at the Ottoman level, but we've also got game from the Sunnah as well. I mean, from the Ottoman Empire, let's make it clear. We didn't invent vaccinations, but we did take to the next level the concept of inoculating via variolation. Variolation is I want you to understand that back in the days, smallpox, which was an infection which absolutely ravaged the world. Millions upon millions killed as a result of smallpox. Probably around the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, the Chinese, as always, Bismillah, mashallah, they're madness when it comes to these kind of things. They worked out this concept, which was then later taken on by the Indians. But I'm pretty confident in myself from my own research that we should rate the Chinese for this first, putting aside the Sunnah, but we'll come to that in a second. They basically saw smallpox and they said to themselves that this is a significant condition, which if we are able to cause a very light version of the same condition in the person using the infection itself, eliciting a minor response to produce a defense in the body against the major one, then this looks like a good thing. They tried it out. What did they do? They would take the scab, and I mean, it was very primitive then, but they would basically try to attenuate it by diluting it or by drying it out, etc. And the Ottomans are the ones who smashed this to the proper level, right? When it came to in modern Turkey, in this area, the smallpox spread massively. What they did is that they were able to basically isolate scabs. They would allow them to dry out a lot more than a fresh scab would. An infected pustule, because when you got a smallpox, you see the pustules. It's quite easy to monitor, right? So they would get the scab, they would powder it, dilute it, and then they would do superficial scratches. And in the superficial scratches, they would create the infection. And subhanAllah, they found that it was actually causing a light version. Took a couple of weeks, but the people were being saved from smallpox. And I don't know, 17 blah de blah, could have been 10, 17, 11, 17, 20. There was an actual, and this is the true part, and this is called variolation. This is not vaccination. So the Muslims really made this very popular, and Lady Montagu was one of these kind of British aristocrats. She was the wife of the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. She herself had smallpox, and if I'm not mistaken, she was maybe even disfigured as a result of smallpox. Anyway, her son, I believe, got smallpox, and she had him treated in Turkey, under the doctors of the Ottoman Empire, and it worked. It was an absolute great success. So then she brought that back to England. She had her other child then inoculated, and then that spread in the UK as well at that time. And then of course now then we know around 1800 or 1790, whatever it is, Edward Jenner then using what had been propagated and perfected and had been trialed, he then took that and he created the modern day vaccination that we know, using the same principles, but he did a different way, as the story goes, as you all know. Well, obviously most of you know, obviously Generation Z, millennials, they don't have a clue what I'm talking about, but read up on it. They would take the cowpox infection from, they would take the cowpox infection, injected it into a smallpox victim as a protection against smallpox, and that was the beginning of vaccination. Anyway, the point is that the Muslims had a major role in the propagation of the concept of inoculating variolation, which eventually then became vaccination. But the asl itself, it can be argued, comes from the Sunnah as well, way before the 1500s, way before the Chinese. The Prophet ﷺ said that if a fly, in Sahih Bukhari, if a fly falls into your drink, then immerse it completely, and then remove it. فَإِنَّ فِي إِحْدَى جَنَاحَيْهِ دَاءٌ وَالْأُخْرَى شِفَاءٌ. Because in one of its wings is the disease, but in the other wing is the cure. Think about that. In one of the wings is the disease, and in the other one is the cure. Yani, you've now been infected, your drink has been infected, so now go back with the same thing for the cure. The concept that you will find your solution in your problem is actually, when you think back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, وَجَعَلَ لِكُلِّ دَاءٍ دَوَاءٍ, and that he has placed in every cure, every disease, a cure, it really starts to come home. You start to now appreciate what's going on here. And this could be argued to be the founding principle of the concept of vaccination, because that's of course what we do. The vast majority of vaccines, regardless of the way, the method that they're using, the vector methods, and we'll come to that a little bit later, they are using an existing vaccine to either reproduce the spike protein, for example, in the Pfizer and the Moderna version, or they will take a virus and they will attenuate it. They will reduce its ability to be able to cause any kind of problem. Kill it, but not kill it in certain ones. Sometimes they're live, but completely harmless, but enough there in terms of genetic information to be able to elicit the infection without causing, to elicit an immune response without causing an infection. So you're using your enemy to be your solution as well. That is established by the Prophet ﷺ and then taken, of course, to the next level. So the question is that, just for those folks who can see this this lecture going off in the wrong direction towards depth and academia and boring, if you want to just kind of stop it right here, and the question would be, should we vaccinate? My belief is that it is not something which is obligatory, just like medication is not. However, vaccinations is not something we should sleep on. It has been one of the great discoveries and procedures in our history. It has saved absolutely millions, hundreds of millions of people, and that's no exaggeration. It is in line with the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu khudhu hidrakum. O you who believe, protect yourself. It is part of our basic principle to ensure, like I said earlier on, taking medication is not something which is obligatory. It's based upon the benefits, based upon the person's beliefs, based upon the consequences. But offering to help people, saving lives, giving medication, what we would say is the basis behind the Hippocratic Oath, for example, that is something absolutely recommended and praised in the Sharia. So the process that's involved for people who are trying to save people in this life and the akhirah, those who are involved, and I don't just mean doctors and scholars, I'm talking about those people who are actually moving forward to try to understand, studying the diseases to be able to work out the cures. So that's immunologists, that's those who are involved in biotech, those who are involved in the research that's required, those that are part of regulatory bodies that are making sure that these things are maintained safe. The effort to be able to, for example, let's just take COVID as an example, to try to protect the elderly, who we see it is a major problem for those who have comorbidities, which is a major problem for, and I'm sure that nobody in this lecture, I mean, there's things about, we can be doubtful and have conspiracy theories about vaccines, and no problem dealing with that. Many of them are true, many of them, which I'm going to deal with. But nobody now is denying COVID and thinking that's a balag, right? Because that would really upset me. We all know how serious this issue is. We all know the impact that it's had. Every one of us knows someone who's passed because of COVID, and know many people who are ill due to COVID. Yes, it doesn't affect the majority of the people. So many get on with it, no issue. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility to our weak, to our elderly, to our frail. It also doesn't mean, and this is an important point, there's clearly a massive pressure on us to try and find some kind of vaccine, not just for the health benefits, but for the economic benefits. The truth is, especially in the West, that we've become so dependent upon a system of hospitals and immediate hospitalization, hospital care and the like, that now that that's been disrupted, because it's not the people who are dying which is the major issue, it's the paralysis of the healthcare system, which stops all the other procedures that we all insist immediately and are demanding as part of our normal social contract, that we need to be looked after. We pay for the healthcare services, we can't have access to it. The only way to stop that is to stop people getting infected. The only way we can stop people getting infected is to keep people apart, stop businesses. So the financial need in itself is probably driving the desire for the vaccine, maybe even more than the health benefits. Because yes, it's true that overall, when you do the analysis, the people who die from COVID, only a small percentage of what would have normally happened from elderly and comorbidity factors anyway. So it's the other factors, and these are also obligatory aspects that must be controlled in society. There is nothing to say that only people who are dying justify the existence of a vaccine. That's not something which Islam makes as a requirement. So just the fact alone that so many millions of lives every year are saved via vaccinations, that Ebola, for example, and measles today is controlled, and they're deadly conditions, deadly diseases, they are controlled today. It's an absolute no doubt that vaccinations are good and in principle, and that they should be supported in principle. But do they have problems? Absolutely. And we cannot ignore those. And against my best interests, against my basic instinct, I should say, I do want to deal with each of these claims, each of these modern issues, to see, are they rumors, are they not? Are they significant for Muslims to be aware of or not? Because everything I've said before is general. But what about the specifics? This is meant to be a lecture for primarily my logical progression students, because they appreciate the depth and they want to hear the facts. So I hope the rest of you will bear with me as I go into these details. So some of the popular claims, I'm going to put them forward. I'm going to give a factual response. Certainly, I agree. That's how I understand the facts. Then I'm going to come back to it and say, what does the Sharia say about whether it's my opinion or their opinion? So I'm not giving the Sharia ruling right now. I'm just talking about the claims, all right, from a factual basis. So number one, for example, vaccines are made with impure substances like pork. True. This is like one of those YouTube videos, when you put the claim and you say true, false. Anyway, number one, true. Some of them are. Like I've given my own fatwa against the nasal flu vaccine, which has got pork gelatin involved in that, and as a problem. And that's a problem because I consider it to be a problem, right? We're going to come to later whether it is a problem for pork gelatin to be involved in vaccines or medicines or food or whatever. We'll discuss that later. But for me, I prefer the side of caution, and that is why neither I use or neither I recommend the nasal flu vaccine for children, especially because, and there are caveats, that is because there is an alternative, and the alternative has as good efficacy as the nasal one. Read, not very good at all. Let me just make that clear. You see, there are people who don't really understand, getting very excited about the flu vaccine. It doesn't do a massive amount. It doesn't have anywhere near the kind of, supposed success rates that these COVID vaccines are claimed to have, or some of our classical ones, we've always struggled with flu. And obviously it's changing and mutating all the time. It's a big struggle. It's something that we're having to live with for our entire lives. For donkey's years we've had flu, and I don't know how many iterations of the flu virus that I myself have given out, changing at least every year, different versions. We're probably going to have to accept this for the rest of our lives. That kind of percentage and the reduced death rate means that we can have a nuanced approach to this vaccine. You'll see that neither do the governments obligate it, and they don't take it as seriously, for example, as they're taking COVID. And so neither are Muslims going to obligate something which the governments and health authorities themselves don't obligate. However, it is definitely going to be helpful in certain strata, certain groups of the population, and they have their own rulings. But I don't want to get into the flu. I just want to say that yes, it is factually true that some vaccines do have pork gelatin. Gelatin, of course, has a very gelatin itself has a very positive, and that's very useful benefits. It really does help a lot in a whole number of ways. So whether it comes to viscosity, whether it comes to coating, whether it comes to X, Y. But the point is that some of them do. Do all of them? No. Do the ones coming up, for example, the 3 that are on the market, that are just about to hit the market, do they have it? We don't know. And if they do, that will be a concern. And the way that we'll respond to it is what I'm going to explain in a little while. By the way, just so that you know, as far as I know from the people on the inside, wallahu a'lam, they are not involved with pork gelatin. But that doesn't mean anything. When we get to know the excipients, then we'll know that. And by the way, this is not some kind of, hidden conspiracy theory. They will let us know they do know when they make these decisions, whether it's a good one or a bad one. And if they're that stupid enough to try to make a global vaccine and put pork gelatin in it, then they deserve a slap, okay? And they deserve the Muslims to say, no, sorry, that's something that we're not willing to deal with. But anyway, we'll come to the Islamic angle on that in a second. Right, the second claim is vaccines are made with aborted fetal cells, or that your vaccine contains aborted fetuses, whatever. True-ish. Now this one really kind of shocks people when they hear it, and probably will shock you now that I'm saying kind of true-ish. But it needs some explanation. Like everything, there's drama, right? There's just a lot of drama. When people try to make this point, they say your vaccine has aborted fetus in it. I mean, just even hearing, aborted. Actually, if you think about it, right, it wouldn't matter whether it's aborted or not. Just the fact that it's got a fetus in your vaccine would be disgusting enough, right? So adding the aborted is purely for emotional dramatic effect, and we don't want to, and we just got to just calm down and understand exactly what's going on. So first of all, the language is inflammatory. But also, the people who deny it also are not being immediately 100% honest. Or maybe they don't understand exactly how this works. What I want to explain is this. When it comes to vaccines, not all of them, and this is a blessing. There's a lot to learn from this point, actually. One of the blessings of our time now is that the noise that's been made by the people of the cloth and the religious people, alhamdulillah, against this kind of process means that they're now turning away from this. But there's no doubt that I would say, as far as I know, the majority of the vaccines that we have in the market today, and almost definitely the Oxford AstraZeneca one, okay, that they are using a process which is called using certain cell lines. A cell line, I want you to understand that when you're making a vaccine, a certain type of vaccine, especially when you're using a vaccine that's using a virus vector, meaning that the vaccine is being introduced into your body using a form of the virus itself. So the Oxford version is using an adenovirus from monkeys, okay, a cold virus, which normally infects them. They're taking it out and they're putting that into the human beings. And when you're doing that, when you're using a virus or largely a virus, to cultivate this, to make large amounts of it, we need to actually produce this virus, reproduce this virus. To reproduce a virus, you have to infect a cell. To infect a cell, and therefore to create the right conditions so that the cell itself can then be used in a safe way to elicit an immune response and to not, to not be the actual virus, but the solution, and then to create the mass, basically what we call the cell media, the culture, right, to make thousands and millions and billions of doses, you need to infect a cell, and these cells have to have special properties. You just can't choose a random cell and go for it. You've got to use stem cells. And a stem cell, basically, without me going into basic biology, is a cell which is undifferentiated. It's the purest type of cell possible. It's pure, it's clean, it has no baggage, it has no pollution, it has no dodgy stuff, whatever. It's as pure and clean, and so therefore it will take on an infection very purely, and it won't have any problems, and it gives stability, it gives certainty. When you're taking other types, you're going to have a problem. And obviously a stem cell exists in all organisms, in adults, humans, animals, whatever, but they all have their issues. The purest possible stem cell would be the one which is taken right at the beginning of life. So whether that's a fetus in a very early stage, or a late stage, or an embryonic stage, or the umbilical cord itself, not even the fetus either, very raw, very early stem cells, or what are known as fetal stem cells, are going to be the best form to develop that vaccine in. The Islamic ruling will come to that later. I will just say for now that this in of itself is not a problem. To use this type of cell in of itself is not a problem. The emotion comes from where it came from. And it did in 1960 or something like that. There was an elective abortion. An elective abortion means that there was a woman who chose to have an abortion. According to Sharia, according to all the religions, completely impermissible, of course, completely haram. But she went ahead and did it. The cells then were taken from that fetus. They were of the purest of the pure. And that then was the mother cell of the cell line. What it basically means is that that was then recreated in laboratory conditions, and it's been continuously for the last 50, 60 years, just continuously reproduced. And it produces basically a set cell media. So basically, if you want to go and make a vaccine, you go and you purchase, you get hold of a sample of that original 60-year-old reproduced culture, and then you go and you reproduce it again and again and again and again. And this has been done many, many times, but they have a limit. They have a limit how many times that you can actually keep replicating them. And the problem is, of course, is that there's a pressure for them to go and abort another fetus and get some new fresh ones. The outrage that happened when they did it first time, and this is why we should not be writing off people as, being dismissive towards anti-vaxxers and so, because maybe some of these anti-vaxxers have been the main reason why I don't think that any major vaccine in our recent times has used any aborted fetus cells in current times. There are claims, but they don't have any basis. The Chinese, by the way, have been trying to do it. I think maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago, they tried to create a new cell line. And how did they do that? Again, aborted fetus. Now, let me just explain this aborted fetus point. When a person goes through an abortion, it's haram, obviously. And when we're talking about that, we're talking significant stages. We're talking months in as opposed to a couple of days or anything like that. But none of these people were told, listen, do you want to abort your baby for the sake of medical science? It was a case of, listen, you're a medical institute, you're a hospital. If someone comes and wants an abortion, then we want to then take then if you're going to go ahead and you make that decision and they're happy with it and blah, 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 and they give you permission, then we want to then to use the fetus. Now, that is what has happened each time. Now, Islamically, that's not justified at all because you're not allowed to abort. But if, for example, and we gave this fatwa in the organ transplantation issues, and this has been something that we've been saying for many years in this country, that in this country, if, for example, someone has a miscarriage, or what we can say an abortion for a Shari'i reason, allowed in the Sharia, and the blood and the fetus is donated, it is allowed to use that donated fetus and its cell for medical research or for whatever. It is allowed to use that, and that's what happens in this country when that for research. We're not talking about the vaccines now, just for research. But back to the vaccines. That original cell line, what do they call it? WI38? Yeah, WI38 MRC5. These are the two purest and the best. When I was, it's been about 18, 19 years when I was manufacturing medicines, the people that I was working with were still using those lines then, and they're still using these lines now. They just keep going on and going on and going on. So if you consider something which has been reproduced thousands and thousands of times since the original one 60 years ago to be an aborted fetus cell, then fair enough, if that's what you're calling it. Otherwise, it's a stem cell which is taken from a cell line, which is our origin was an aborted fetus. Those are facts. I haven't gone into opinions yet. Those are facts. Now, the cells that we have, the viruses that the vaccines that we have today, I think that, I don't know this for certain, and again because we don't have the information yet, and we'll speak about that later as well. But the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which are not working on viruses themselves, but they are mRNA vaccines, which means that they're sending actually a signal, RNA, to the cell to initiate a response as opposed to infect it, okay, like an attenuated virus would. Because they are taking that approach, they didn't need to infect cells and they don't need to recreate, produce the cells in that kind of media using these cell lines. So even this point, even if we make it that it's the most disgusting haram thing ever, even if we did, it doesn't apply to all vaccines. But it could apply to the Oxford one. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine did use this cell line. But another factual point needs to be made. People are thinking that that somehow makes a part of the vaccine itself. No, this is used to produce the bulk of the vaccine. It's the media, it's the culture you should look at, you should see it as. The actual content, the DNA of those original cells is removed, absolutely removed. And by the way, there are people who think there's some kind of conspiracy theory that DNA is being left in there to control people or whatnot. It is not in the interests of pharmaceutical companies. I don't care whether they're big pharma or small pharma or your dad's pharma. It's not in their interest to be putting into your body any kind of variables that they can't control, they haven't been able to study. They're already really, really stressed and worried because they've accelerated everything to a crazy small time. Normally they have plenty of time to study and look at the issues, the research, the side effects, blah, blah, blah. Now they're being forced to make it so much, they can't be risking playing around. So I can tell you now that, and this is fact, this has always been the case. I'm not just saying this is something new that I'm telling you, but they will remove every single bit of fetal DNA or any kind of connection to what that actually originally was. Now, whether you need to do that from an Islamic point of view, we'll come to. But at least the fact is that yes, the original cell that produced the main cell line that a number of vaccines have used and are using today, and possibly the AstraZeneca one, did actually come from an aborted fetus. And there's more than one of these cell lines as well. But we'll come to whether it's halal or not in the next section. All right. Number 3, vaccines cause autism and other conditions. False. False. According to the vast majority of tests, analysis, peer-reviewed papers, blah, blah, blah. And there are, of course, dissenting voices. And of course, there are some other studies. And there's a lot of politics and this one got discredited and these people got discredited and blah, 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 blah. You can spend your whole life trying to go back and forth. The truth is that the MMR vaccine itself has proven to be remarkably successful with very few side effects, relatively speaking. Side effects, of course. And long-term, who knows? And how much long-term? The MMR has been around for a long time. We've got a lot of data. It's an actual, I mean, the blessing of the MMR is that you can see after so many years in play that it definitely, that our guess is a very good one. Now, autism is a good example, you see, because autism is a slow burner, right? When you think of autism, it's not something that you would imagine that you take the vaccine and you got autism the next day. How do you even manage, how do you even measure autism that quickly? Most of the times, when you take a vaccine, we're looking for immediate responses in the first couple of days, couple of weeks. You know, you might get a rash, you might get lethargic, you might get gangrene, you might have a heart attack. Yani, there are certain things that can happen quite quickly and it's easy to monitor, and then you either say this is the serious side effects, there are no side effects, whatever. But those are happening 20 years, 30 years in the future, right? Autism is a slow, long burner. It will be something that you'll only pick up after a couple of years or many, many months or whatever. It's just a fact that you cannot, especially if you're accelerating a process, you cannot discount the fact that the possibility that there could be long-term side effects. And there is no one, or there should be no one in their right mind who's a health professional that should be saying there are no side effects. How do you know that there's no side effects? There could always be. But then that's the case for every medication. Every medicine is based upon the possibility that there are certain things that we know that we don't know. Listen, even every pharmacist right now, every doctor even right now, when they have their BNF, when they have their daily documents and papers in their interaction with patients and giving out medicines, it is their responsibility to every day fill in a sheet if they see a side effect, send it off to the Medicine Health Regulatory Agency to indicate that, listen, we think this could be something, investigate it, look into it. So this is a feedback system. So it's not like they're trying to hide something. And when you start to kind of say they're trying to hide this, trying to hide that, you're going to the areas where you require evidence to be able to establish that. Based upon the MMR results, we can almost, because who knows, maybe there are a few cases that it caused like that. Allahu ta'ala a'lam. But according to the majority data, the analysis, and again, obviously I'm summarizing, my notes here are maybe 100 pages long. I have all the evidences right in front of me, but and again, it's my opinion. There are people out there that will say, but what about this guy who gave this deposition in front of Congress, blah, blah, and this guy. You will never be able to convince someone. When you've lost confidence in authorities or in the system, it's game over. And I'm not saying that you should have undying confidence, but there's very little space after that to be able to come from a solution. Anyway, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, there is a risk in every medicine. It's one of the brilliant reasons why the scholars did not obligate the taking of medication. There is absolutely a risk with everything that you take in, and you have to manage that risk. But managing the risk should also be based upon science and stats. And the stats do not support this idea of autism in vaccines. But could it happen? Could it happen with a new one? Maybe. Why not? Okay. My goodness, this is going to be 6 hours. No. Inshallah, we're going to get there. Number 4, vaccines have genetically mutated substances, etc. True. Of course it's true. I mean, so does your loaf of bread. Yani, good luck to you trying to live off your garden, yani, for the rest of your life. Everything that we eat, drink, breathe, smell, whatever, is now genetically modified, blah, blah, blah. So, that's the future, actually. So, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to either accept it or go and find the mountains and bite onto the trees. Number 5, vaccines are claim number 5. Vaccines are a form of global control by the cabal or the cult or the Rothschilds or the Jews or I don't know, whatever. Just put your own kind of phrase in. Maybe. I can't give a true or false on that. I mean, I don't know if it's true. I mean, it's a sick line for a movie. I mean, it's, every movie sells out on this kind of idea, right? But, if it is, what's so new about that? I mean, you know what? We're gonna hate on the vaccine companies any for wanting some of the fun? Yani, because let's just assume that, this is all part of some global control. Somehow we're all going to be controlled, by everyone being taken a vaccine, their movements and all their blah, 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 blah. Listen, bro, we already gave control to them. They know where we are, where we live, where we sleep, where we're moving, this, that, whatever. Alexa and God knows what these little things are called in the house, Google, moderation. They're hearing you, recording you. Every time I'm chatting to my guy about, listen, I want to buy this, I want to buy that, I go to Facebook, flipping adverts there. You get freaked out. It's a madness. So what level of control don't you want? I mean, I'm one of these people who, I read the articles, Google's this, Apple's that, makes you absolutely terrified. And I'm thinking, astaghfirullah. Then I get the email from Google that says, you traveled in the city this much and this was your favorite places. I'm going, wow, that's nice, that's sick. I'm the one who is willingly giving these service providers all the information that they want. Listen, I'll take it even further. People thinking that these sleep and wellness apps, make you sleep better, make your dreams more healthier. What a lot of rubbish, man. They're just listening to your brainwaves and they're trying to get in there. If that's not true, that's a sick plot. If it I should sell that. So I don't know. I think folks are watching too much Black Mirror. I think there's too much. I think that's where things are getting out of control. I think that the future is a lot more scary than you actually realize. And listen, if this is how the vaccine companies and big pharma are going to get involved, then so be it. Honestly, this is a silly point and a mute point. And even if they were, it's only because we are doing it, right? And you might say that, no, the governments are making it obligatory. Well, as far as I know, the governments are not making it obligatory because it would cause too much of a headache for them. But that's directly. Indirectly, they're making it obligatory because we're not going to be able to take flights and get access to this. And there's no doubt about that. We've already been given clues. But the question is that haven't we done that already? And what is it that we're actually trying to hide from? Anyway, I don't want to speak too much because that's me putting my opinion upon it. But if people are saying the conspiracies out there of control, then I would say that's largely true. And I think we contributed to that. Number 6, obviously the best of them all. There's a couple more left. Bill Gates is putting a nanochip into the vaccine so that everyone can be tracked. Listen, straight out, I ain't got time now because we're running out of time. False, it's not true. That's neither a fact from any single company. But I want to now share something with you. All right? The concept is absolutely true. One of the main roles that I have today is to go through investor decks for a lot of med tech companies and medicines as well. I work with investors and I invest myself as well with different companies. And I've seen in a few of the investor decks devices, I'm not going to obviously name names, which are aimed at the big lifestyle market. It's a huge market. Like what, 100 billion? Just in the States alone. These are figures that I know, that I use, that are people that are looking to be able to track certain things. Now, obviously you've seen, just to give you an idea, the reason the Apple Watch 6 rushed out with this oxygen wearing kind of, oxygen sensing kind of function is to build upon the fear that's been created that all of our oxygen sats are sats. Nobody knew what oxygen was or sats was or 92% was or anything before COVID. Now everybody's an expert. So now they want to use the Apple Watch to tell them whether they got COVID or not, right? So everybody's looking to do these kind of things. But there's a genuine group of people, diabetics, who need to measure their insulin. And there are devices that are being looked at that are sometimes in connection with the skin, a patch on the skin, and an implant underneath the skin, which will be able to monitor your blood and your fat and your cholesterol, this, that, whatever. Yeah, there are ideas that you could be putting in a barcode and it could be able to be scanned, etc., etc. This is not fantasy. This is not science fiction. This is science fact. They're looking at that right now. Now, if that's what you think a form of control, well, again, people are only doing that willingly. Can that be manipulated? It probably can. Will the people who use that service care? I don't think so. But make of it what you want. The final point, number 7, vaccine companies are protected from being sued for damages by their respective governments, proving that there are problems. This is absolutely true. Absolutely true. And this is actually a really kind of shocking point. The vaccine companies, when they started off however many years ago, were, producing all these great results, etc., etc. But you know what people are like, some of them genuinely got ill. Others, want to imagine that they're getting ill. Others have got Desi auntie syndrome, they always think they're ill, right? And I've got this, I've got that, got this, got that, making their own illnesses up. That's what Dr. Abid always tells me, Desi auntie syndrome. I love that phrase, yeah? And so they were just blaming whoever they could blame. The vaccine companies were pushed into a corner where they were, despite having the key, such an incredibly profitable business where everybody's dependent upon their product, they're actually losing money, facing so many claims, litigation, genuine ones, by the way, sometimes, and some not so genuine. And all of these court cases and litigation society, especially in the US. And so the government in 1988 enacted a program that was called the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. Okay? And it basically said that, vaccine companies are now exempt. You got a problem, you're going to deal with us. So the government basically guarantee, and most of the Western governments do this, they guarantee their vaccine companies in order, and according to them, it's to avoid vaccine shortages, it's to avoid the resurgence of diseases and to instill confidence. If you think about these statements, these were the actual things that were put into threat, because once the people saw that they're not being taken seriously, that there's a lot of, what's going to happen, can I take this risk and what will happen to me if I have damages, etc., etc., etc. So as a result, they decided to guarantee the vaccine companies. Is that a problem? Yes, it's a problem. It proves that there are real issues out there. Let me tell you how much. Approximately $4.5 billion have been paid out against 25,000 claims in the last 32 years, according to I did a little bit of adding up and so on. Yeah, that's from the US government itself. I'm not one of these Alex Jones websites, guys. All right, listen. I don't do your bestie here. Don't worry. In the last 32 years, 25,000 claims, 4.5 billion. Some said when you add this to other claims as well, it can go double that. But anyway, the point is that represents real problems. In the UK, we have the vaccine damage payments scheme, we're obviously, yani, as you know, Brits are always more, yani, more cultured compared to the Americans. Yani, we said, listen, boys, this is how you do it. So we have got a cap. Each person who makes a claim will get whatever they can claim up to a maximum of 120k. You know what? It's been a while since I engaged with it, because when I was younger, I used to engage with it regularly, not because of me, but because of people used to ask. But it might just be a one-off payment that everybody gets, whatever the level of injury, or maybe it's a pro rata or stages, and it's a maximum. But I think it actually even could be 120k to every person who can prove that they've definitely had a significant reaction to a vaccine that has been recommended to them by the government. So, on one hand, you could say this is proof that there's problems with the vaccines. On the other hand, you'll say, who said that there weren't problems with the vaccines? Who said they were perfect? These are medicines. They have problems. They have side effects. They have long-term effects, short effects. In the UK, probably paid out about £80 million over 40 years. Our system's been going a bit longer. All right? Anyway, those are the claims, and those what I would say are the facts. I want to now respond to some of these facts I want to put forward what the scholars have said, or what the Sharia suggests about each of these individual facts. And I could take absolutely donkey's ears on this, but I'm going to be trying to be as quick as possible. The first one, vaccines are made with impure substances like pork. The scholars have always differed over the use of gelatin. Now, obviously, gelatin is completely fine when it comes from a halal animal. The problem is that in Europe and in the West, which is where all these medications are mostly made, the gelatin is coming from haram animals, meaning either animals that are killed in a haram way, not the dhabah, or animals which are dead already, which is carrion, meta, or they're coming from pig. And pig is the dominant source of gelatin in Europe, whether it's for medicines or for cosmetics or for food, whatever, etc., etc. The claim is that we all know, and I'm going to just give you the headlines of a class that I teach in a lot of detail. The concept of istihala means a transformation of one state to another. And the examples are like a rat, which is impure and horrible, but if it was to fall into a vat of salt and it dissolved over 10 years, and you then took that salt and put it on your chips, it'll be absolutely halal, because there's been a complete and utter transformation and a chemical and physical degradation and breakdown into something else. The most famous is at-takhallul, which is khamar, alcohol, which turns into vinegar. And that is a complete change of state. Something which is completely haram, which is now something which is completely halal. Does gelatin go through that phase? There are two basic opinions. First of all, on istihala, there are a number of different opinions. Like, for example, the Malikis, the dominant school that supports istihala is the Hanafis. They are pretty much supporting it, fully. They are accepting the process. They're okay for it to happen to those cases that are in the Sunnah and those which are outside the Sunnah. And which is ironic, of course, because that means that according to the Hanafis, you've got the best chance of making gelatin halal. Now imagine saying that today to the Hanafis. That just goes to show today's Hanafis, the actual Hanafis. But anyway, I don't want to mess about. So then the other scholars have their own opinions. The Shafi'is are not accepting that at all. They're the most restrictive. They're saying that only that which happened in the hadith, such as vinegar, but nothing else. We cannot allow the istihala to occur. It can only be that which is naturally occurring by itself. There's a lot of nuance. I'm not going to go into that. All I'm going to say is that there are two schools of thought on the modern interpretation of whether gelatin from a haram source becomes something halal. And that is basically based upon, does it change enough? For those who think it changes enough, they do not need a complete change. They use the examples that, and it's a strong, listen, that's the other way around. My mind, my opinion, my personal opinion is with this school, that there is enough of a change in the gelatin from its, and gelatin is what? It's collagen, it's skin, it's the hide, it's the bones, it's the tendons, the ligaments. It's made of all, these are all proteins. They're stripped out, crunched down, boiled up, chemical reagents, boiled, reduced, boiled again, and then it is dried out and put into powder or into sheets. This product here, I consider to have changed enough. I don't, in my approach to this, and the large number of scholars that allow this, we don't need a complete change. Everything that you go and do a DNA sample from will be able to tell you that this came from X pig or X cow or X whatever it is. You can always trace it back. But is that necessary? For example, vinegar. That is something which is completely halal. There's absolutely no debate about that whatsoever. However, every bottle of vinegar has the possibility of having a certain amount of alcohol in it. Because what is the process? Takhallul. Alcohol is when alcohol ferments, you have the fruit. It then turns into fruit juice. If you drink it quick enough, it doesn't go off, then it starts to develop the oxygen, it oxidizes, it develops the OH bond, it becomes an alcohol. That then goes through, if it ferments even further, then it becomes acetic acid. It loses the OH and it becomes acetic acid. So it goes on a stage process. You know, people are always saying to me, is it allowed for me to drink red wine vinegar? White wine, I'm getting my pack what is mixed up. White wine vinegar or white wine vinegar, yeah? So, or spirit vinegar. The answer is that all vinegar comes from alcohol. Where did you get the idea that alcohol, the vast majority of it anyway? And you will still find within vinegar certain percentage, and I think according to law, that as long as it doesn't go above 1% or 2%, you can still call it vinegar. So I want you to know that there's always going to be parts that are there. For example, when it comes to the tanning of skin, the changing of state of one skin to another, from impure to pure. There are some scholars that even allowed the tanning of pig skin, that you could purify that. Remember Shawkani, for example, Shaykh Al-Albani, for example, and some of the Zahiri school scholars from the back in the days, because the Prophet ﷺ said that if a skin is tanned, it becomes pure. And he never said, except the pig, except the dog. He just said a general statement. So if a pig skin, which is still a skin, can be purified from its moisture and its hair and the smell and everything, and it still is a skin, and we are considering this halal and not haram, then some scholars argued that it doesn't matter that the pork gelatine is not completely chemically transformed, it's still there, but it's in a different form. And that's okay for us to use. And it's not recognizable as the original. So they allow it. And so if you allow it, and it's a dominant, no, it's not dominant, it's a acceptable, prominent opinion, then any medicine or vaccine that has it in it will be fine. And that's what the Sharia says from that angle. If you take the more conservative position, which is what I would say is my heart's position, and that's what I practice. So in my mind, I'm okay with it, but in my heart, I prefer caution. I prefer to not go anywhere near any porcine gelatine. I do not consider there to be enough of a transformation. When I put my pharmaceutical hat on, I can see that the primary structure and even the secondary structure of the protein that is itself the gelatine doesn't get broken down. It doesn't get broken down like alcohol does. Alcohol really completely changes at the chemical level. Gelatin doesn't. I would almost say that gelatin is manufactured to the powder that it is, as opposed to chemically transformed, even though chemical reagents are involved. And a large number of scholars are upon this position. And if you follow this position, then you're going to avoid anything that has pork gelatin, whether it's food or and that's the position that I prefer. Having said all of that, both camps will accept that if there is a necessity, if there is a very important medicine or a need, or for example, a vaccine that the authorities considered was a must to be taken by everybody to control a pandemic, unlike the nasal flu example, something that had to be done, then this would be permissible because of the need. Not just because of the need, but because even the issue itself is mujtahid fi. It is something which is differed over in principle. And when something is differed over in principle, there is space to take the more lenient opinion when there are evidences for both sides. So that's the Shari'i response to the first point. And that's, by the way, is whether even these three vaccines that all this discussion is about contain gelatin. We don't even know. We don't even know, but we will find out. They can't hide things like that. It's not in their interest. It'd be flipping stupid for them to actually do a global vaccine with pork gelatin. Right. Vaccines are made with aborted fetal cells. That claim, I already explained what it actually is. From a Sharia point of view, we will never accept the original ruling, but the original ruling does not affect the fara. The ruling on this, the offshoot, is not connected to the ruling upon the original action. We will never promote that. We don't want that. We don't want to tell people that this is something which is a good practice. We celebrate the fact of the people who protested, the Catholic Church firstly, and then a lot of the Muslims, and then lots of other people, who just, you call them anti-vaxxers, call them what you want. They have made sure now that the vaccine companies themselves are very, very sensitive to this, because they know the people are very sensitive. That's why right now, we're nearly there. SubhanAllah, I remember 18, 19 years ago, I gave a lecture on stem cells and what they will be used for and the Shari'i implications. I can't believe that 20 years later, I'm actually speaking, that's probably the first time I've spoken about it now. Now we're at that stage where they will be able to reset an adult stem cell Hopefully moving away from the need to use these really pure, stable, that's the big thing. They're so stable, these cell lines, right? They don't give you any surprises. So it looks like that we're going to be able to move away from them. But from a Shari'i point of view, the ruling on something now is not the same as what it was before. The Prophet ﷺ, for example, he would deal with the Jews. And the Jews, when I say deal with them, he would give them money, take the money from them, borrow money from them and use it in blessed holy things himself. And we know that the way that the Jews at their time, that they had made allowed in their religion, that which was prohibited in ours. So it's something which is haram, just like abortion is haram. Now the Catholic Church, by the way, let me just make a point here on the aborted fetal cells. Again, they were not forced into abortions, they gave it. It's still haram, of course, but the Catholic Church were far more sensitive to this, and we are far less sensitive to this. Why? Because abortion, according to us and them, is different. For us, when I say us, I'm a bit more strict, but the four schools of thought, they consider 120 days and under anything happening to not be an abortion. 120 days, because they said that, I mean, there's some nuance here, and don't come at me because I know the nuance, but I'm just generalizing, okay, just for the sake of this discussion. They said that basically the soul is breathed in only, and then that's when it's real life, but before then it's possible, and there's more, and there's nuance. But anyway, the Catholics had a heart attack at that. 120 days, they're like, oh my God, that's literally a baby. Right? What are you talking about? But that's because the Catholics even consider day 2 to be an abortion, and day 5 and week 4, because their life starts at conception. So we also just want to put out there that if a person, for legitimate or illegitimate reasons, after a couple of weeks had an abortion, we're not going to treat it like the Catholics should. But the language is still kept the same, that emotive, aborted fetus kind of language. But still, we should be pushing away from that. But let's not push away from the principle. Stem cells are some things which are needed, have so many benefits. And you got to get ready, by the way, because this is the medicine of the future. Now, we're just hoping that the use of stem cells from more ethically understandable sources, can be used. And by the way, as I said, if it comes from a halal source, meaning an abortion which is allowed shar'an, according to Sharia, then there's nothing wrong with that. So, as I was saying, if the first thing is haram, if it is haram, right, it doesn't mean this use of it is haram. Million times over now we have a cell which is taken from the cell line. Why is this considered to be haram? The Prophet ﷺ, for example, it's haram for him to take zakat or sadaqah. He's not allowed to consume zakat or sadaqah. In Bukhari, he goes to his home, he sees the fire burning, he says, I want something to eat, what we got? And Aisha said that, no, we don't have anything, or actually all we have is, if you want, is Barira, who was the freed slave, her meat. Someone gave it to her as a sadaqah. The Prophet ﷺ said, it's a sadaqah for her and it's a gift for me. Because the Prophet ﷺ can take gifts, but he can't take sadaqah. The ruling in its origin is something which is haram for him, ﷺ. The consequence, the offshoot that he's going to actually partake in is halal for him. For us to use a cell is halal in of itself, regardless of its origin. For us to be able to, even if we were to assume this conspiracy, this idea that the fetal tissue enters into the vaccine, this also is not true. But let's say it was true. We're talking a minuscule amount that would be ingested of a stem cell. And if you're saying human tissue, how can you have it? Human tissue, you can eat human hair, you can eat small type of amount of blood. I'm talking microscopic amounts. The ingestion of human, it's not like the same as me biting someone's hand off and eating it. We're talking tiny amounts of cells, if we're going to go there. But like I said, now I'm becoming unscientific. This is what happens when you start engaging the masses, you start speaking like, there is no fetal tissue in the culture remaining that enters into the vaccine itself. Let me just make that clear. But anyway, and also I remember writing, يُغْتَفَرُ فِي الْبَقَاءِ مَا لَا يُغْتَفَرُ فِي الْإِبْتِدَاءِ. There's also a principle that certain things which are continuous are not considered as serious or as important as those things which are starting again. And we will, our pressure inshallah will avoid people starting this for the first time. Right, vaccines, number 3, vaccines cause autism and other conditions. Islam says very clearly that to take medication, the benefits should outweigh the risks, but it never negates risks. Every person is in a scenario where they make that decision. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, this goes back down to the trust that you have in a system. There's no doubt that these people are being rushed into doing these clinical trials and these processes. There's no doubt that they are. However, that's the need. We have asked for that need. We have put the pressure upon the system, and we're relying on the structures that we've got, which is the FDA in the States and the MHRA in the UK and the other regulatory agencies around the world. Okay, and you either trust them to do their due diligence or you don't. Now, I trust them. It's not because I'm from the industry. It's because I've worked with them. I've lived with them. Yani, I don't live my entire life absolutely paranoid that every single person is out to get me and following me and whatever, even if they are. And if they are, good luck to you. If you're listening, watching, I hope you're enjoying the show. I hope that you're finding my life interesting. I hope that you're enjoying my body inside, because I don't enjoy my body inside or outside. I don't care what you're finding beneficial to follow me and to control me and whatever, whatnot. And this is me. You're free to believe what you want to believe, but the facts must not be played with. Every medication has the risk, and the Sharia has no problem with people managing risks. In actual fact, in Sharia, we will even accept a certain level of risk if it will lead to the benefit of the many. And we have a maxim, a قاعدة فقهية: يتحمل الضرر الخاص لأجل دفع ضرر العام. The individual harm will be tolerated in the interests of averting the harm of the masses. Meaning, in simple terms, that if someone can take one for the team, then that's all good. And listen, yalla, pass me the ball. I'm that Pakistani who's ready to take one for the team. There will always be people who should be, from a Shar'an point of view, accept the risk in a wide issue. And listen, shout out to all those volunteers who put themselves forward at taking the vaccine, not even having any clue what's going on. You hear a lot of people praising them in the wider society. The Muslims have also got to, stand up and say that was people who are living that qaida, living that qaida fiqhiyya, that maxim. That's an Islamic principle, by the way, that some people, they take one for the team. Wallahu alam. To continue the responses, number 4, the vaccines have genetically mutated substances. The ruling on that is dependent upon the substance, simple as that. So each substance that we come across will give a ruling accordingly to it. But I want you to know that we are very flexible. The Sharia is no more flexible than people think. Now, I might not be, because of my social, cultural kind of angle. Like again, the pig thing, we know. Paks are absolutely allergic to pigs and anything to do with pigs, right? Like we shiver at the thought of it. That's why I said my mind is pretty comfortable with the concept of gelatin. But I physically feel like retching, thinking that I go even anywhere near pork gelatin. I don't care how reduced and changed it is. That's more social than it is Islamic. Likewise, when we're talking about this point of genetic material, right? We get sickened at the idea, but from a Shara point of view, we look at the actual thing itself. Does the Sharia prohibit something because of a text? What is the reason? We're even allowed to ingest poison, for example, in small amounts if it acts as a cure. There's an almost consensus on that. If it is, and of course many medicines are a poison in large amounts. So I just want you to appreciate that there's always going to be a risk, especially when you're taking certain things, especially if there's a necessity for it as well. All right, number 5, vaccines are a form of global control. I've already told you before, I don't think there's anything that I need to add from a Sharia point of view. Control is not something which is prohibited in the Sharia. In actual fact, if you want to be really traditional, and this is why I say to people, be careful what you wish for. Because when you want the Islamic ruling, you're going to hear something that you're not ready for. You see, a lot of people are very relaxed in democracies. They love their liberal freedom and that nonsense that they live. The dream of liberal, whatever bakwas it is, yeah? The truth is that now the Muslims are more liberal and democratic than the system itself. The system itself is criticizing itself, and the Muslims are still living in cloud cuckoo land drinking Kool-Aid, if that's even acceptable as an analogy these days, because I know that's, some people get sensitive to that. But the Sharia is very hardcore. No divergent opinions, no disobedience, must listen, people are not ready for that behavior. People are complaining about global control. Wait till the Khalifa comes. Then you will see global control, bro. Right? There is, again, this is where people's sensitivities are clashing with the Sharia. Sharia has no problem anyone having global control, as long as it's in the interest of the people. The Prophet we have a principle in Sharia that the overall authority of the ruler, manutun bil maslaha. Manutun bil maslaha means that because of the public interest, and the ruler ruling in the public interest, as long as they can obviously justify that, then they have the right to be obeyed. Now, of course, people are going to differ on what is the public interest. And that's important that we have that discussion. Because if the anti-vaxxers and the pro-vaxxers were not having this discussion about what is in the public interest, then many things would happen. I'll tell you what I come across, something very interesting I want to read to you, right? For example, different countries are approaching this different ways. In the East Asian kind of countries, they're not so hot on the vaccine. The vaccine is just a portion of their strategy. They're more focusing on testing, isolating, controlling things. And then once everybody's had a vaccine, then we'll have one as well. You look at the US, the exact opposite. Yani, you know, just like we as our stereotypical understanding of what an American actually is, lazy person who just wants one pill, yani, to solve all the problems of life. Yeah. So that's exactly the same. They're going on, they're not able to isolate themselves for 1 minute. They want to go out and do whatever they want. They don't like discipline, you know, the whole Republican Confederate whole kind of history there. They love their freedom, big government, they don't like control. They hate that kind of thing, right? East Asian sides, they have no problem with that. They're already virtual dictatorships, they can live with that, they're happy with that. Americans, the exact opposite. So they're banking everything on this magic pill or magic injection. So it's the key pillar of their strategy, and the UK to a lesser extent. In Europe, Sweden for example, they went down herd immunity. Herd immunity. Now, it's amazing that a country and its health authority would think that herd immunity is something that is achieved where you allow the concept is a certain percentage, 60-70% of the people, once they get infected, there's a level of immunity that would then protect the rest, because that will be enough of a number to be able to control the virus. Somehow someone forgot to give them the memo that this means herd immunity by vaccination, not herd immunity by getting them infected. This is amazing. And obviously they've now made a massive about turn. But this idea that you let the people go out, let the infection rage, and let the people get infected, hopefully it only gets 60-70% of the people not going to die, because we know who it's going to infect, right? And hopefully the elderly are in the 30% and somehow everybody gets protected. It's the most stupidest thing ever. But what I read something which was very interesting from the Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami, which is the Islamic Fiqh Council, in April, in their special session. They said it is not permissible to pursue a herd immunity strategy due to the greater risks of death for the elderly and those with comorbidities, as this was sacrificing them without right. Yeah, subhanAllah, it's really weird for the scholars to get involved in political strategy and health strategy, but they did. They put a statement there, and actually, ironically, we're expecting them to be the least educated on the issue of science. They got it spot on. Herd immunity by allowing people to get infected naturally. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? So this is all discussions about what is best for the public interest, and discussion should be allowed, and it should be tolerated, and we should be able to debate it and discuss it. But once your authority gives the ruling, then it's all in. We all have to go in, because after that discussion has been done and the decisions have been made, you have to have then confidence in the system. All right, Bill Gates putting a nanochip into the vaccine, number 6. Listen, as I said, if you allow it, so what? Number 7, vaccine companies, this is the Sharia I'm talking about, not me. Vaccine companies are protected from being sued for damages by their respective governments. The Sharia has no problem with that. There's no evidence for this to be something which is haram in any kind of way, as long as people understand. All right, let's come to the end. I know that I've just gone on for long enough. Actually, I did a lot better than I thought. I thought it was going to be 2-3 hours, but I will be done in about 5 or 10 minutes. In conclusion, if you're a person who's not interested in the news and the claims and my opinion, your opinion, and your madhab and my madhab, and you just want to follow the senior scholars, which is a very safe thing to do, then in 1992, on the 14th of May, the Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami, which is the premier fiqh council that gathers all of the major scholars of the world into one body, in its 3rd session, they passed a resolution, a qarar, that states, it is permissible for the ruler to obligate medical treatment on a case-by-case basis, such immunization programs, and on a case-by-case basis, like immunization programs, and against the spread of infectious diseases, i.e. vaccinations. It is obligatory to follow effectively the ruler who puts that in place. Now that is assuming that statement itself is behind all of that is them knowing that their interpretation of the safety, their interpretation of the data, their interpretation of risks, short-term and long-term, once they've made their decision and they obligate it, you have to follow it. If you want to follow the Islamic position, then that's what it is. That's not my opinion. That's not your opinion. It's not the political opinion. That's the scholars of all madhabs, all representatives of every country in the Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami. That was done in 1992. That was without anybody realizing that there are financial issues or problems and stresses and whatever. Imagine what they would say right now. In fact, you don't need to. In this current sitting, they've said this and far more than that as well. And I just want to say that this idea that the Imam can force the people to do something, it is well established in our principle. Now, as I said, we don't know whether the government is going to force people or not to take this vaccine, but indirectly they are, because many of our services are going to be restricted if we don't have the vaccination. But I want to just say, folks, we're pretty much living that system anyway. I mean, I know they want to give the old example of Hajj and Umrah, but you can't go to the Haram without a meningitis certificate, and you've had the meningitis vaccination. That's been the same for years. And if there's anybody in the world that knows this, it's Muslims. We travel a lot more to these dangerous areas than before. Back in the day, we never used to consider traveling without taking malarial tablets and working out what we're going to have to take, not take. When I went to Africa, to West Africa to study, I had to get the yellow fever vaccine. I was not able to get the visa at all. I had it rejected first time, then I had to go back get it again. And there were others I can't even remember. I've still actually got my card. Back in the day, I used to have a card. This has been a system for a long time. So we are the ones who choose these kind of luxuries. I mean, if you really don't want to take the vaccine and don't want to be obligated by the government, then go and live on a mountain, make your own I know this sounds very dismissive and insulting, but it's so rare for people to be able to do that. But if you can, then great. You don't need to travel anywhere, don't need to go anywhere. Just go and live and be self-sufficient and live off the land and avoid all of these power structures and these requirements and obligations. But it is important for us to know, even if there's going to be risks, even if some people are going to fall down by the side, even this is allowed. I covered this at the beginning of the year when we spoke about turning off the machines for people who are COVID ill, on life support, etc. Can decisions be made where a small number suffer at the heart of to the majority of with the interest of the majority? Yes, Yunus alayhi salam, I gave that example. He was sacrificed for the masses on the ship to survive, even though the people didn't want that to happen. This principle is okay. It's something which is allowed. And our authorities are not going to go that far. But if you have confidence in the authorities, like I personally do, I think that there's no problem with that or following that, and I think there's an interest in that. Listen to some of these things I want to say. It is essential for the integrity of the Muslims to act Muslim. We just have to act a little bit more Muslim. Because there are values and realities that are being kind of expressed in this pandemic that we're seeing, right? That are not befitting of the standards that we expect from ourselves. We've got to be more critical. When I saw the anti-vaxxers claiming everything, that disappoints me so much. When I see the pro-vaxxers with their rose-tinted glasses thinking that everything's all great, that really disappointed me. We don't need to make fabrications. We don't need to copy all of this nonsense and fake rubbish and all of the problems that they have. There is enough factual evidence out there. The Muslims need to be aware of. Big Pharma is a real thing. Now, Big Pharma as a phrase when it's talking about the conspiracies is not true, but Big Pharma as a concept in that it represents the major pharmaceutical companies and the problems that are associated with them is absolutely true. If you don't think that the major pharmaceutical companies don't price fix, they don't influence key decision makers, don't lobby people, they don't suppress information. If you don't think that happens, you don't know what you're talking about. Listen, I'm currently involved in an investor deck with a company that I'm about to invest in, right? Where I had this discussion myself. We're trying to find the place to do the clinical trials. And the decision to do the clinical trials, for our own financial interests, I mean, obviously it's not a vaccine, it's not injected, it's external. But still, the clinical trials we're looking at is which one's cheaper, which one's quicker. Europeans are going to mess us about, doing it in South Africa is going to be quicker. These are decisions that are being made all the time. Some of these are acceptable, and some people push the boat out beyond where it needs to be. Greed is greed. Greed is generic. It's not just the big pharma. It's not some Jewish conspiracy. It's not the Rothschilds. It's not some cabal. It's not God knows whatever they're called. It's not the vaccine companies. Everybody's got game in corruption. Okay, أخونا Munsif Slawi, this miskin who's the Muslim head of Operation Warp Speed in America. One of the brothers, Jazallah khair. He was part of the vaccine, he headed up the vaccine program for GSK. He had to leave all that, blah, blah, blah. He gets headhunted because he's the top man. He's a top man, he comes to the game with shares in Moderna. He's there regulating the industry. He's making the key decisions about what's going to happen, right? And And the guy's got like, multi-million share in Moderna that is, by the way, gets a $1 billion grant from the US. I don't mean the $1.5 billion that it got as an upfront payment to produce the vaccine. I mean $1 billion just for the research. Now compare that, you might have seen the interview with the BioNTech vaccine with Pfizer, the Muslim brother, I forget his name. He made it very clear. He said, we didn't take any funding. We didn't restrict ourselves. Now, listen, Pfizer has its own problems, let me tell you. Yeah? They've had, I don't know how many payments paid out of court for a lot of dodgy practices, price fixing, blags, not quoting all, not making, suppressing safety data. All of the companies have got that on their record, all right? But he made it very clear, we didn't take that funding, and we got the benefits as a result of that. Yani my guy, Munsif, mashallah, he was able to channel this, that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Jazakallah khair, he gave the money away. He sold up Moderna, he gave it to charity, and he's now heading that up. I'm just saying that, I hate the word woke, yeah, but we've got to be woke about these things, right? It is important for us, to be aware of the issues and so on. And so if you think I'm dumb, I'm just ignoring it. Bro, I'm not dumb. Yani, might be a bit of a pandu, but I'm not dumb. I know what's going on. We are professionals, we understand the field, but we also understand that we have an innate confidence in the structure and the system because we've worked with it. It has supported us throughout the time. We've seen that it is not true, a lot of the conspiracies behind it. We believe, that definitely that things could be done better, right? Look, I'm going to give one example before I close. This is something which is fascinating. Look what an absolute omnishambles the press release by AstraZeneca was. If you look at this vaccine, that's, the UK one, 100 million doses already bought. It's going to go to be the global program. It's only going to cost $2-3. It's the one the whole world is going to be depending upon. And this is a company that doesn't have the greatest record in terms of vaccine. They're not as experienced as the others. It made the biggest mess up when it released its figures the other day. Average efficacy is 70% against COVID, which is an average from 62% and in one trial and 90%. And the 90% was the old chestnut, serendipity. We just fell upon the cure by mistake because we made they didn't tell all this information at the beginning. And what has just come out, what have we just realized? Actually, the 90% result was from such a small sample size compared to the larger one, and it didn't have any elderly in this percentage in this trial group. So the 90% figure is actually statistically weaker than the 62% one in terms of, it's not like for like. Obviously the dose is different, which was by mistake, I get it, but it doesn't even have any elderly in there, as far as I know. My point is, these are the kind of mistakes that happen when you change your system. And what was the system that was changed? When they went to the press instead of going to peer-reviewed journals. The system itself has been the most critical of these. And you got anti-vaxxers who are absolutely screaming about the system. The system is not broken. The system has checks and balances there to make sure that people don't get away with it. Why do you think that the FDA hasn't given authorization for these companies, even though they've got these products for a good couple of months now? Why don't you think that they've given? Why are they waiting? What's the difference between today and tomorrow? Because they've got concerns. The AstraZeneca one's going to be delayed. There's no doubt about that. They have no doubt. AstraZeneca, they rushed it. Back in the day when there wasn't internet and Facebook and people commenting every day and night, they would just release their data to the peer-reviewed journals, experts, peers that would go through it, smash it up to pieces, praise it, destroy it, come back with real figures, give the results, then go to the public and go to the press, and that's it. Now it's the opposite. It's exactly the same thing that what happens when someone dies or kills, or gets killed, or there's an incident or an event. Immediately the press are upon it. It's terrorism, and then the law enforcement agencies are under so much pressure to be able to then prove that it either isn't, or to give the media the fodder that they want. So now in the 24/7 global kind of news cycle where everybody wants new information when there's no information, we're forcing actually every event to be a potential terrorist event. We're forcing every possible part and stage of clinical trials to be a big important event. So now they've changed the way that they report the results. Who on earth presents scientific analysis to the press and releases it on Twitter? And they release an abstract, which is absolutely useless, which is why AstraZeneca then went absolute nuts, and they're calling, all of their executives are calling all of the different agencies and FDA and saying, listen, by the way, there are actually more facts. We didn't put it forward because it was only a press release. We didn't want to go into more detail. You shouldn't have then said it in the first place. This is the classic example of little knowledge versus wisdom and experience. Anyway, you know, there's lots of things that we can criticize, but the system is what's holding it together. I trust the system. And if you don't trust the system, and you see that the system itself is inherently corrupt or inherently, you know, some big scam, then no, I've already gone 1.5 hours and I have to finish now, but nothing is going to change that, all right? I want to say that I will close with the facts. The vaccination, by the fadl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is an amazing, blessed tool, right? That saves millions of lives in processes where the benefits far, far, far outweigh the risks. Where there is nothing impermissible intrinsically, as I have put before, unless of course the caveats that I mentioned with impurity and so on. But outside of that, maybe some distasteful practices, some corruption, but the actual product itself is like any other product and the food that we take in all the time. Everything has the possibility of some kind of problem. We should focus on the facts. DNA editing, that people are worried about, the mRNA one. It's not editing your DNA. It's not putting RNA into an RNA code which encourages your cell to produce, is not editing your DNA. And if you are having a problem with DNA technology, I want you to know that DNA technology is the only way that they're going to be making medicines in the future. Right now, hundreds of millions of people are taking the best form of insulin, which is a DNA produced product. Biotechnology in the future is going to be doing that. Most cancer treatments are going to be DNA edited. The phrase is called precision medicine. Look out for it. Keep an eye on it. Where your condition is going to be, the medicine is going to be created according to your actual genetic code, your own DNA. So people who are scared of DNA, you haven't seen nothing yet. And you can't have people complaining against the system if it's specific and individual to you. So to close, if someone says to me, listen, Bill Gates is trying to put nanochips, you take this vaccine, he's going to nanochip you. I'm saying, bro, give me that vaccine. I don't care if he sticks a flipping laptop up my nose. Okay? Nanochip, a little tinkle thing like that. I'll have you can stick it up. No problem. This is what's going to allow me to travel, allow me to get my chicken, allow me to go and fly. Then so be it. So, anyway, jokes aside, I hold it at least permissible and indeed recommended for folks to take the COVID vaccine when it comes out, the one that best fits our requirements. By that I mean in terms of its purity, in order to protect ourselves from potential harm, and in order to safeguard others, such as the elderly and those that are compromised with comorbidities or other conditions, because for them it is definite harm. For us it's probable harm, for them it is definite harm. If the government was to obligate it, whether directly or indirectly, then they should be obeyed in line with our civic contracts as citizens, even though I don't consider the vaccine obligatory in of itself. That's the conclusion. Now the millennials can start watching the video. Generation Z, hi guys, this is a lecture on the COVID vaccine 19. I know that you're not interested in the previous, you only want a 1-minute summary. So let me tell you that it is permissible to take this vaccine in principle, and specifically according to its excipients, it will be then halal as well, but we'll see when that information comes out. I recommend it, I would take it. Do I obligate it? No, but I think as a community and as a society and as countries, we should take it. But yeah, I know that none of you are interested in that, because the only question you're asking yourself, most importantly, is am I taking the vaccine myself when it comes? Yeah, that's what everybody wants to know. Answer is absolutely yes. That's actually not the most important. The most important question that people ask is, are you going to give it to your kids? The answer is, you see, that's not the most important, because I couldn't even give a monkeys about these rascals, right? You should be, I couldn't even remember what they eat, any little rats. Yeah, you should ask me, would I give it to my little Hiba, my hubs? That's the question you should ask. Would I give this vaccine to Hiba? Do I trust the system enough? The answer is yes, absolutely. And on that note, remember that we trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is a shafi. He is the one who heals. Everything is through His will. This condition was sent down as a trial, requiring us to reflect upon ourselves individually as a community. Our spiritual infection is more important than the physical one. It can be the most healing, these vaccines, of our physical natures, but if our spirituality and it goes back to the poor state that it was before, then we didn't even deserve to be healed in the first place. That's something that is so important to remember. Guys, jazakumullah khair. I really appreciate your patience. 1 hour and 35 minutes. That is actually shorter than I thought, but you wanted an in-depth lecture. It wasn't as in-depth as I could have done it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Obviously anything that I said which is correct, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything which is wrong is not just from shaitan, but from my rushing to get through things and maybe some misunderstanding. I hope I didn't insult anybody. I'm not as anti-vax as people think I am. I'm not as pro-vax as people think I am. I am in the middle, and so should you be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وجزاكم الله خير وسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك اللهم وأتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.